What is up, good people? So today we're talking about two things. First, the pump, and second, soreness. So we're going to start with the pump. So what is the pump? The pump, I'm sure most of you have experienced it. It is blood flowing into the muscle, and then it is trapped there by the constant tension, the contractions of aforementioned muscle, and then it swells up. The cells actually swell, they get bigger, and your muscles look bigger. It's basically like seeing yourself in the future. And when it comes to muscle growth, I think it's best to view the pump, if you are natural, as extra credit. It's that little question at the end of the test where the teacher's kind of like being an asshole and he's like, let's see if anyone can get this one. And it's like 2% extra to your grade. Only focusing on the pump is like skipping all of the test, all the other questions, and then just doing the extra credit. Probably not going to maximize your score. Now, there are some good things to the pump. They're just pretty minor. The first is that it feels good. Now, I think it feels like pretty good. Not as good as some people think. Some people think it's like the best thing.
Right?
But, you know, if this enhances your training, if this makes you feel good, if this makes the training more sustainable or more enjoyable, go for it. Next, it can tell you what area or what muscle group you are actually targeting. If you're doing curls and your lower back is getting pumped and you don't feel anything in your biceps and just nothing is happening, that's a problem. The pump can also perhaps help with stretching the fascia that actually covers your muscle. It's basically like a sheet that covers your entire body and just wraps around everything. And once you get really, really big, this might actually be the limiting factor for growth. If you're natural, I don't think this is really something to worry about because you grow so slowly, the fascia just stretches on its own. But if you're enhanced and you're putting on 50 pounds of muscle in a year, which I've seen happen, well, fascia might actually be the limiting factor. And so getting a pump and sort of pushing back that wall of potential growth might actually be a thing. Next, it is extra blood flow. And so this might actually be delivering nutrients to the muscle. Now, again, if you're natural, I would say this is not a big thing. But for enhanced people, delivering all that shit that's in their bloodstream to the muscle is a big part of actually making the drugs do what they're supposed to do. And when you realize this, it explains a lot about why enhanced lifters train often quite differently than naturals. Okay, so they're using partial range of motion to try to keep that blood in the muscle. They're often using more isolation movements, again, to keep constant tension on the muscle. High reps, higher training volumes, shorter rest times, like 15 or 30 seconds, or well under a minute in terms of recovery times. Whereas for naturals, you're better off spending 2, 3, 4 minutes and actually giving a quality effort rather than just going for the pump. And they'll often use machines to keep constant tension on the muscle, and especially to have more tension in the contracted position. With a barbell bench press, you're not going to be like contracting at the top, but for a natural, that probably doesn't matter because going for the pump is less of a focus. Again, it's that 2% extra credit. For an enhanced lifter, it's like 30, 40, 50%. It's a huge part of the results. And there's really not that much in terms of downsides of getting a pump. The only downside is when you ignore the other factors in terms of progressive overload, in terms of just adding weight to the bar, in terms of training close to failure, in terms of giving a quality effort, that kind of thing. If you throw that away and you go for the pump, as a natural, you will not see the same results at all. It's just a different game. And realizing that early in your training career is very important. So let's say you want to train your quads. If you're going for the pump and you're putting the pump on a pedestal and you're leaving everything else at the expense of the pump, instead of doing squats for moderate weights near failure, which would be a good quad exercise, or sissy squats, whatever, it's all good, bro. You might do leg extensions for, multiple sets, high volume, short rests, contracting at the top, maybe some partials in there as well, slow eccentrics, isometrics, just like pumping the muscle, partner assisted reps. You'll have an ungodly pump, but it might not necessarily be better for growth. For example, when I reviewed Noel Dazel's hypermass training plan, he had a set of incline bench for 3 sets of 30 with a bunch of slow eccentrics and like contractions and pauses and other bullshit. If you're natural, that is just the height of stupidity because the weight you're going to be using is so light that you're not really going to be triggering muscle protein synthesis. A 3-minute set gets you nowhere. Next up, soreness. Now, a lot of people, myself included in the past and myself included right now, they often use soreness as the judge of a good workout. But I think that's probably not the right mentality to take, again, especially if you are natural. Now, typically, it's thought that muscle damage causes soreness, and this is almost certainly a contributing factor, but there are other factors as well. Muscle spindle nerve damage, connective tissue damage, oxidative stress, calcium ion leakage. There is a bunch of stuff going on, and we don't have a full picture yet. I'll link an article by Chris Beardsley on this in the description, which shows there's a bunch of possible mechanisms. But either way, we absolutely do know that soreness is not needed for growth. And just because you get sore, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be experiencing more growth. In fact, for a natural, I would say you have a limited capacity to recover from muscle damage, and therefore it can absolutely be excessive. It's typically a bell curve when you try people on a training protocol. So some people respond really well, they gain a lot of muscle, most people gain a little bit. Some people actually lose muscle in response to a new training protocol. And this is probably because of muscle damage. And it's probably best to view muscle damage and or soreness as unwelcome byproducts of proper training. If you're training with sufficient volume on the good movements, often those that cause a lot of tension in the stretch position, which can independently cause muscle protein synthesis and hypertrophy, it's going to be some damage. Like, there's no way to completely avoid damage, especially if you're training, again, close to failure. All these things that cause hypertrophy are almost certainly causing some damage. But damage is not the goal, and soreness is not the goal. And even though soreness should not be the goal, a lot of personal trainers will target soreness for a client.
Already broken.
Why? Because you can feel it. You get sore as shit, and the client is like, "Oh yeah, that workout really fucked me up. It must have been good. Something's happening. I can feel it." And they're both tactile, sensational things. And when I say sensational, I don't mean like, "Oh, fantastic." I mean it's a sensation. Okay, you can actually feel it, and therefore most people put way too much weight on the pump and soreness. They are not that important. And it's not hard to get a pump. It's not hard to get sore. Okay, these are not complicated things. Okay, and especially if you're natural, just make sure you keep them in context of what actually matters. So training sufficiently hard, close to failure, progressively overloading, doing sufficient volume to keep progressively overloading, and just focusing on the basic movements and putting enough tension on the muscle and giving a quality effort every single set. Not soreness, not the pump. If you want to get a pump, you go get a pump. You go do those spider curls for sets of 50 if that's what you want to do. But it's just important to keep in mind how important it is, again, in the context of the entire training plan. All right, that is all for this video. Like, subscribe, share, notifications, pet a kitten, all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next video. Peace.